Welcome to the Atomic Level, the show where we decode the matters of wealth, one insightful conversation at a time, with the rising stars of finance, business, and tech so that you can grow and protect your net worth and your net happiness. But today we're back for Wednesday Matt Chats because it's office hours time. I am Chris Snook, and I'm welcoming my counsel and friend back for another Wednesday. Matt Miley, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. It's nice to be back and kind of unusual. Sometimes when people see me, they don't want me back. So thank you for taking the leap.
When the billable hours on me and you, we want you back, right? So here we go. In the Shields and Succession Digest, guys, for those of you who are new or who jumping in the room or listening to it on replay, we're looking at a strange contradiction. Last week, we spent a lot of time talking about the gap between knowing and doing. Americans over 50, they knew that estate planning matters, 76 some odd percent of them. However, the majority did not have basic things in place or documents up to date, and there's a lot of anxiety. This week, yesterday, we dropped an article very specific at the real anxiety that Gen Xers feel, very unique to that. So we're going to unpack through that context of yesterday's post and content, Matt. We're going to talk about kind of the unique frame that we're seeing across these multi-generations now, because Gen Xers have long been seen as the sandwich generation between their boomer parents and the Gen Y and Z children. But really, they're the first generation in the last several hundred years of America's history that doesn't have the expectation of inheritance or benefits, right? They don't really, they're not going to say no to the money or the stuff, but they don't have this expectation or this anxiety around what they're going to get. They are hyper aware of their anxiety around the mess and the administration that they might inherit as it relates to their already overburdened, overcomplicated, and overbusy lives, dealing with both aging parents and their care potentially, as well as young adults who are living at home longer and facing a world of cost increases and everything else. So with that frame, Matt, high level for us, the opening topic that you're seeing when you're working with families, and whether it's the boomer who is typically initiating this or the Gen X or a mix of both. What are you seeing out there right now, kind of on a day-to-day basis?
It's a mix of both, basically there. I mean, the boomer really, what did it go from 1946 to 1964? So there's quite a few people in that class, and a lot of them are getting a little older and needing to take care of some things. I mean, the older we get, we're not supposed to say senior anymore. So the more vintage we get, we start thinking a little bit more about our mortality and leaving our legacy so that we're going to be remembered well. How to do things so we're not leaving people in a big mess. So we see a lot of those, but then we're seeing some other people, because their parents are in the boomer age and thinking about that they're starting to think about it as well. I remember when I kind of went into this whole problem, where we had a vintage person staying with us in a house, and we had, four other people, teenage boys and things like that. Just like you said in the intro, we had young kids we were trying to take care of, or younger kids we were trying to take care of, and older people we were trying to take care of. And four adults in the house, five adults in the house actually, and we only had two bathrooms. You know, and one of them was in the room that we're renting to the older parents. So it's just like one morning I woke up. And this is what goes through your mind, even though I'm a professional, I'm supposed to be really, honed in on knowing what to do and everything. Here I am, I wake up in the morning, I don't have access to bathroom, right? Do I go outside and risk getting tickets and things like that, or what do I do? Anyway, it was a big enough problem that I went on to my local app that sells houses, and I just brought it up, and all I did for parameter was four or more bathrooms. And, in my neck of the woods, I guess, realtors don't think that bathrooms are worth very much because they don't usually list them. So there's only like 3 or 4 houses that listed having more than 4 bathrooms. Within a month, I bought one of them.
Hmm.
It was just like, "I gotta have bathrooms. This is ridiculous. I need more room. I need to do this." And so I only say that because it happens to everybody, and if you're not prepared for it, and catch you off guard, and maybe you can make some silly decisions because of that. I'm not saying I'm not counseling anyone to go out and buy a house because they don't have enough bathrooms, but was the only solution I could see to this area, this whole
Well, I think
neighborhood.
weaving it into the practical applications of all of this stuff, estate planning, asset protection, generational, um, family operating system, the communication flows. It's actually not the silliest example because again, it's very human, right? Like we love our family, and then we also usually have the most stress around people in our family, and then when you factor in financial strain, when you factor in overhead, when you factor in upkeep, more blended families than ever. And, we talked about this last time, some of the challenges related to just, the will and trust being out of date or unfunded. And, a spouse passes away and now they have to own this piece of property with the in laws. What could go wrong? Like a lot of those comments you made last week. But building on the one that you just said about literally making a transactional choice around where you live and domicile simply because of the number of bathrooms, because now you've absorbed more bodies underneath the roof, regardless of whether they were younger, older, or all of the above. These things for the Gen X kind of leader right now, which is really being thrust into the role, whether they want it or not, of the family administrator. Because if they're lucky, mom and dad, have put their ducks in a row and had their affairs in order. But again, they may not have communicated it. And so there's like just that, like assume one thing that they have their ducks in a row. What does the Gen Xer have to do to properly become aware of where the documents are, where the passwords are? How do you even broach those questions? Because these are super practical things like the number of bathrooms that often just go missed.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big thing, and, the whole deal, came upon us because, one of my in-laws needed help, needed nursing home help and things like that, and even though she was in a skilled nursing facility, for the other one, I never thought about putting him in a facility, it was always, "Okay, this is family, we need to take care of them. We need to keep them in the home as long as possible, even if it's our home." So the thought was never, "Hey, let's ship them out and do this kinda thing." But a lot of it was because we didn't know what money was available, we didn't know what the assets were, we didn't know, could we get qualified for Medicaid in a quick manner, Could we spend down the money so that we wouldn't have enough to be disqualified? The tremendous amounts of skilled nursing facilities, how much those cost a month, like, 10 grand a month or somewhere in that ballpark, What are we gonna do? How are we gonna put all these things together? What do my, in-laws have for assets? If they're not, if they're incapacitated, can I even get to those assets? I mean, who's on the bank accounts? What bank accounts are there? Because this wasn't even my family, right? This was, my wife's family, and so how do you even talk to somebody else who's not even your parent about all these things? And it was really a quagmire, and trying to work full time, trying to raise two boys, and doing all this stuff at the same time was really hard to know where do we go? What do we wanna do? And so it just kinda defaults back to, "Hey, I just wanna let you know, I'm gonna keep you in the house as long as I can,
Mhm.
and I'm gonna take care of you. But to be able to take care of you, I need to know some things. And I need to know, what do I have? What resources do I have to take care of you?" And kinda start the conversation that way, say, "Hey, I wanna help. I wanna be here to help, and I'm gonna help, and I'm gonna protect you. I'm gonna keep you out of a place where you don't wanna go as long as I can. However, in order to do that, I need to have some resources or know what resources are available to me. And I also need to know where everything is that you have so that we can keep your access to it. Because if you lose access, if you fall or something, if you break a hip and you're gone for a while, your daughter and I need to figure out how we're going to, take care of you, and we need to find these things so that we can do that for you." So I think it really comes from a position of, I wanna help, which wasn't manufactured, it truly was I wanted to help, and it was truly that, we're family and, family doesn't go to the old folks' home, family takes care of family, and so my thought was, I'm gonna put my resources in that. I'm gonna upgrade and get a bigger house, and in exchange for that, I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I'm showing you that I'm gonna take care of you. And in exchange for that, I need to know what I have to work with and what documents are there and
Right.
who have you named to be the person to control this stuff when I can't. or
Yeah,
you
and I think,
can't do.
like, that all comes down to the difference between being nosy and being prepared, right? What you're focused on there is help me help you, but that means I need to be prepared. And I will do my best to not be nosy. That's kind of the plain speak way of saying that. Um, some people might choose differently, right? Some people choose to incorporate everybody into one domicile. Other people will choose, or maybe even want, their parents may even want to go to more of assisted living or a longer term thing. We talked about some of those implications and how you mentioned last something I didn't even think about was the last chance to grift and land grab the wealth transfer is in all these developments over the last 10 years of assisted living homes. Because after that, at the current rate of expense, our generation, Gen X and whatever, is not going to be able to afford it at that same clip. When you're talking about 10, 15, 20, $30,000 a month for long-term care, it doesn't sustain. And so if this is the last chance to do that, how does the Generation X person best navigate the conversation when mom and dad say, "We've got it all, we've got it. Here's our will. We've got it all handled. Like we'll let you know." When they're a little bit resistant, not because they're not prepared, but because they just don't have that communication dynamic. What are the things that you can do that are in your control to get prepared if the other side is just not willing or able to communicate effectively? What does someone do then?
And that's what makes it so difficult, Chris, is when you just don't get any cooperation because a lot of our information is on our smartphone or on our computer and things like that. And if you don't have the passwords or the ability to get into those phones or the electronic devices, you can't find out what people own. Now, a lot of the older generation still uses mail and they have everything mailed to the house. So you can kind of see what the assets are and things like that. But that's basically what you need to do is you almost got to go on stealth mode. You look at the mail and or you look at the credit card statement or you look at whatever you can find to find out what constant payments are on what assets there are and things like that. The home's usually easy, you can find out where the home is and deed and all those kind of things. But how do you find those other assets? And so you almost have to just talk about it again, come with a position of humility and honor that parent by trying to help them and to get in there. And you really have to build the trust. If you can't do it, a lot of times there are other places in the community that help seniors with finances and things like that. They'll come write checks and things like that. They won't pay for anything, but they'll write the checks and help you keep those. So sometimes you can get those people involved, and that's just simply talking with your parent and saying, "Hey, I know this is a hassle paying bills all the time and whatnot. Would you like some help? Would you like this agency to come in once a week, once a month, whatever the need is, and help you pay bills and things like that, or come in and say, hey, instead of writing a check every month or for these things, can I help you set this up with your bank to do an automatic bill pay or something like that? So again, from that posture, if I want to help you, you're kind of finding out what everything needs to be done. And then in the extreme examples, I mean, you can have yourself put on their bank account as an owner or things like that. Uh, being a professional that was in a highly litigious type of industry, that was never a really good option for me because the minute I put my name on someone's bank account, some made for TV lawyer could come in and take that senior's account because my name was on it. So you just gotta, be real careful how you're doing that. But those are the two. If you can't get through on yourself, I would hire help. Most people, even myself, Chris, if I think about it, paying bills every day when I'm trying to run a business and stuff like that, it'd be wonderful to have someone to do that for me. So you appeal to
Yeah,
their needs.
what occurs to me, because again, a lot of this audience is going to be in the range somewhere between 1.5 million to 30 million in investable assets. I know some of the subscribers on here are worth exponentially more than that. Some are worth less and aspiring. We call the Henrys, right? The high earner, not rich yet uh, category, where they're earning a big salary, but they haven't yet kind of started to put things into a structure to compound. um, but the high net worth person that outside of their primary residence has 1.5 to a couple $1 million typically will have an advisor. that advisor for the boomer generation is often not right now the same advisor for their Gen X child
Correct.
who is going to ultimately administer this. So in some ways, I would imagine that the practical approach is ask if you can have a conversation with the advisor, because that fiduciary will kind of be the protected conversation starter between mom and dad and you, because they're acting on behalf of the client, which is your mom and dad. But you can get answers there, or your concerns there can be kind of echoed to a fiduciary who ultimately may be better at communicating it. Do you agree with that? Like, even if it's not your advisor, is that a practical next step for most people, is to try and figure out, can they get in conversation with?
You can. I mean, the part of being a fiduciary means you owe a duty of loyalty to your client, and therefore you can't disclose anything without permission. So there's a lot of permission. So if you're working with a parent who won't give the permission, you don't have a lot of leeway to do that. But straight to the point, um, if you do have a parent that is not talking to you about finances because they're somewhat embarrassed because they don't understand how they work, or they know that they supposed to put them in an estate planning trust, but they don't know how the trust works. A lot of times they don't want to let you know as their child that they don't know what's going on or they don't have all the answers. So if that's the case, then definitely yes, you can say, "Well, it's all right if I talk to your financial planner, or even to the with the attorney that helped you do the estate plan. You know, if we can get the authorizations and the releases and keep it confidential." It's a great way to start. One of the questions, if they are working with an attorney for estate plan, is ask them the last time that they had their plan updated. If it's 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Some of them stick them get them done very early and stick them in a drawer, and they may not even work at all now. They may have kids now that aren't even mentioned in that will or trust. So I think those fiduciaries, if you can get permission to talk to them,
They moved from the Northeast or the Midwest down to Florida or Arizona, and it doesn't occur to them in that moment, right, that they probably need to either get a whole new trust or update everything and make sure they're in the right jurisdiction. And none of us, boomers or Gen X, none of us think we're going to die tomorrow. We know we could, but none of us think we do. So when we're moving to Florida, or when we're doing that, we did the will 3 years ago in Massachusetts. It's not top of mind to fix it because we're excited to move to Florida,
right. Right.
Carolina. Um, and so, just again, as a practical question around those kind of life changes, it's a way to insert without being, nosy. Hey, super excited about you guys moving, mom and dad. Can you just let me know how, if I could be helpful at all with some of the other things, like helping you with any estate planning stuff. If you need new resources, I'm happy to make some calls. Like, tell me what would be valuable, what wouldn't. And again, give it to them, right? Some of those practical nudges that kind of remind them
Mhm. Yeah,
that you
we
care,
don't.
that you're interested, that you want to proactively be prepared, not be nosy.
Yeah, you wanna be we want you, mom and dad, to be remembered well, for your legacy and how hard you worked and how, nicely you got everything arranged before you passed away. Are you really certain that Kansas will work in Florida? So or whatever, are sure the laws are gonna be the same, or do we need to look at this again? And do you need help doing that? Can we tag along to the attorney meeting with you to just listen to what's going on? There's a lot of ways to approach it. There's just not really any way to mandate that unless you actually, if they're incapable of taking care of themselves, so they're incapacitated for financial purposes, then you can do a conservatorship or guardianship or one of those things where you're basically taking away their rights and inserting yours. Then you can get a lot of that information. But again, if you don't know the passwords to get into the phone, you may be control and have all the power to do things, but you just can't find even the bank that they use, unless you
So
do
this
some
is a
investigation.
somewhat of a segue to where I want to talk about some of the strategic weeds a little bit with you, because this wouldn't be relevant to everybody, but someone certainly with north of $2 to $3 million worth of investable assets that is quote unquote domestic onshore, meaning they have them here, they're not going to leave them, they're staying in the U.S., right? Um, but they don't need those assets to live tomorrow, meaning they can live out their years with whatever their daily thing is off of a big portion of their assets, and maybe they've got other assets that they know they're just basically going to generationally pass down or give to some steward, whatever that may be. Wyoming Asset Protection Trust, specifically through the lens of where I could create some continuity without having all this disruption if I move, if I do that, for assets that I don't need tomorrow. Talk to us a little bit about where that fits into strategy for a wealth plan, some family that's got somewhere north of $2 million worth of assets and doesn't need them all to live out their remaining years and wants to just keep it protected, simple, free from creditors, and kind of codify that. How does that fit? How does somebody get started educating themselves on that? Let's talk through some of the steps they need to think about with that.
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. Typically, if people do have some wealth that they don't need to live on because they're okay on the other side, that's a candidate to put into one of these trusts. If you think about a trust in general, a revocable trust, one that can be revoked at any time and changed and amended and those type of things. In most states, those are simply used as a way to avoid probate, is to keep out of court and conflict when you die. A will needs to go through probate. Not having a will needs to go through probate. So a trust can avoid that. And that's why you have it. But the normal trust doesn't have any asset protection at all, unless you write it a certain way and it has asset protection when you die, which means you have asset protection for your loved ones, which means for your kids, their creditors and their predators can't come in and take that. So, the Wyoming then offers this trust that you can do the same thing for yourself without dying, which is kind of a plus if you think about it. Um, but a
Right.
trust, typically, you want to put in their personal assets, right? Because that's what asset protection is for. You can put in business assets, but once you put a business asset in there and the business hurts somebody, you've just invited that creditor into your trust. So typically, if you think about, we want the asset protection trust to have your personal assets in it. So if you had a million, 2 million, even $500,000 in assets that were invested, you could consider putting that asset into a Wyoming Asset Protection Trust. And it simply is an irrevocable trust. I said the first one was revocable. This one's irrevocable, which means it's not really changeable, amendable, things like that. And it's a way to hold those assets so that you're the beneficiary of a Wyoming trust, where in the other states you're not the beneficiary. You die, so you're no longer the beneficiary. It gets asset protection for your kids. In Wyoming, you're the beneficiary, so the beneficiary gets to ask the trustee for the money.
So
So
let's break down some of those terms because people have heard some of these words, but again, pictures matter more than anything, right? What does it mean in my mind? What
mhm,
word? They might come across things like self-settled trust. They might come things like words out there on the lexicon of delegated asset protection trusts. Are those two words synonymous? If so, yes, or are they different? And if so, why?
well, yeah, self-settled just means you are the one that set up the trust.
Okay.
So if it's set up by me, I'm setting up the trust. So in most states, when you set up a trust, you're setting up a revocable trust. That's a changeable trust. Okay. And if you think of a trust as like a cup that holds your property, there's no top on that cup because there's no trustee that has to say yes or no whether you can take things in or out of that trust.
Hmm.
Technically, there's a trustee, but it's you. It's self-settled, so you're the person that sets it up. You're the person who is the trustee, and you're also the beneficiary. So that's what makes it revocable because it's the agreement between me, myself, and I, the
It
grantor.
avoids probate, but it has no asset protection because I can take things in and out. No one can stop me. So therefore, I'm liable and accountable.
Correct. And probate is to take all the assets that are in the trust. You don't have a trust, is take all those assets and get them to change ownership to the new person. Where the trust, we've already changed ownership into the trust, and that's why it avoids assets or it avoids probate because it's now a contract instead of a statutory thing.
Gotcha.
So when you then have a irrevocable trust, that's when you have a trustee that can make the decision whether or not it comes in or out of there, okay? And in most states, you can't self-settle that. You can't set that up for yourself. So you either
Yeah.
have a different trustee or you're not the beneficiary, but the beneficiary has to ask for the money. And that's what
Right.
makes it irrevocable because you have this trustee top. In Wyoming, the trust there, asset protection trusts, are self-settled, which means you can set it up. Yes, you do have someone saying yay or nay whether you could take the assets out, but you're also the beneficiary asking for the assets. So it's just basically, I didn't have to have my parents set up the or someone else set up this irrevocable trust for me. I could go to Wyoming and set it up for myself.
So
I
it's
could
kind of
self.
the best of both worlds. You get the trustee layer that puts the lid on it, makes it irrevocable, gives you the asset protection while you're alive, and you get the benefits of being the beneficiary as well as the one who sets it up that you don't get in other places. And there's several states that do it. There's like 17 states that have a version of this. The four most common are Alaska, Hawaii, of all places, Nevada, and Wyoming from most people's search. What does
South
Wyoming
Dakota's in there too. Of course, South Dakota is pretty good as well.
Yeah. What does Wyoming do as it relates to this or precedent in the case law that make it uniquely different than say Alaska, Hawaii, or Nevada as a choice?
Well, they kind of look at each other because it's kind of a marketing technique where they try to adopt the latest, coolest thing to do for each trust. But um, typically, what the Wyoming one does is it's available to anybody in the country, and probably even the world because it allows the trustee to be what we call a limited liability company, a Wyoming limited liability company. And since that company is set up in Wyoming, that's what gives you the residency that you need to be the trustee of the trust. Um, and so that's pretty unique with a lot of other areas. Now you can become a foreign limited liability company in a lot of states, but this one just allows you to be what we call a Wyoming trustee, and that's what the statute requires. And most of these states that allow you to do this, the trustee needs to be in the state where you're doing it. So that's one of the things, and we call that a private family trust company up there. And then when you put the word trust in a
Also, because of the privacy or the anonymity or there's other things that make those PFTCs unique.
There are, in most states, when you do a limited liability company, you really need to give your name, who's organizing it, who's putting it together, and things like that. Where up in Wyoming, you can have an organizer do that. They basically set everything up without disclosing your name, and then the organizer resigns, just leaving the company there. So it does give some privacy. Of course, a trust currently doesn't really need to be registered or anything like that. So, you don't have names in there. So you can get that little privacy boost there. I mean, if somebody wants to pay a made for TV attorney to come after you and they can spend a lot of money, they can find you and things like that. But it does give a little bit of privacy to set that up. Also, the in Wyoming, the banking commission signs off on the LLC, the limited liability company that's a private trust company. They sign off on it to basically say this is a non-regulated banking company, which is unique in Wyoming. Maybe a few other.
What kind of benefits does that give the the member essentially of that PFTC? Why is that I mean, that's a unique thing, but why is that a unique deal? Is that because of also KYC and other disclosures that kind of it shields from?
Well, I think the way to answer that question is just basically say that this asset protection, whether it's a limited liability company or a trust or something like that, it's only going to be as good as the formalities that you keep. In other words, you have to follow the rules. And if you're not following the rules, your creditor comes in and just says, Your Honor, they're not following the rules. Why should we have to, pay us? And
So
having a state agency sign off on your private family trust company, I mean, that's some street cred, right? I mean, you've actually gone through the hoops and had that done. And technically, you could ask that you don't want them to sign off, and now you would be a regulated banking industry for that private family trust company. have to file a little more forms and things like that. But as we know, with some of the FinCEN things that came out about reporting who the responsible party is and things like that, the regulated companies weren't required to do that because they were already doing it. So, you get some benefits from there as well. But getting back to it, it's mainly, hey, I've taken the time. This is just not something I threw up so that no one could come after me. I've taken the time to set it up right. I'm following the rules. And not only that, the state that administers my trust or the jurisdiction where my trust is has signed off on it. They know about it and they've said it's okay.
I think that's a key thing too, because there's a lot of, there's a lot of cool articles and, everything from the Freedom Tech blogs, everything else about asset protection and trust, and Wyoming will come up quite a bit because it's been it invented the LLC first. You could say Delaware perfected the marketing of it, but Wyoming invented it, and they've got the charging order. They've got some really unique things around property rights and things that they've stood the test of time with. However, setting it up is not really the key. It's the maintenance. It's the love and care of it. It's like a Mercedes. If you're going to park $2 to $3 to $10 to $20 million worth of assets into a Wyoming asset protection trust, you better have minutes up to date. You better have proper funding back and forth, asking for distributions, getting clear, like all those mechanics. And the ironic thing is unlike a Mercedes, it's actually cheaper than most people think to maintain, but very few people do it. Like on a $2 million, just call it average use case, it might only cost you 2.5 basis points a year once it's set up to maintain it. So when you think about 2.5 basis points on, like $5,000 to maintain it is nothing, but most people don't do it because they set it up and they go, I got it. And it's private secured. It's over there. And then the judgment comes or whatever, and it's not as judgment proof as they'd like because it is easier to pierce. But if they understand it up front, they kind of know what they're buying.
Yeah, and that's correct. In going to the Mercedes analogy, anyone can sell you a Mercedes. Just very few people can tell you how to take care of it.
Right.
And that's the difference when you're working with someone who's helping you with a trust or a limited liability company or whatever. Anyone can do it. We can do it on our own. We can look at the documents and get it done. But are we following the rules? Do we know how it works? And we see this all the time, especially with the limited liability companies, is that they have an operating agreement which is a governing document of the limited liability company saying, I'm going to have a meeting, every so often or whatever. Even if you're a sole member in this company, you probably have an operating agreement. You need one. That's part of the rules that shows that you're being serious about this business. And if you're serious about the business, your business can be serious about protecting your liability. And you're looking at this and your operating agreement says you're going to do this, this, and this, and you never do it. Well, that's what a plaintiff's attorney is going to ask you. It's going to go through your operating agreement. It says, well, here it says you're supposed to have a meeting, an annual meeting every year. Do you have them? You don't necessarily have to have one, but you probably should have a resolution in your book somewhere that says we decided not to have one, but we thought about it and we're waiving that requirement for this year. Those are the things that get people in trouble. And, they look at the state that they're in. It's like, wow, it only costs $100 to set up this LLC. Boom. They have one. It doesn't have an operating agreement because most states do not require that you file that with your LLC. So it doesn't have a governing document. So what do you use? You use the state statutes, which are they're not written specifically for your business. They're really broad in general.
Mm-hmm.
And you start getting in trouble from there. So maybe
Yeah,
it's $100, you wasted it.
Yeah, the worst thing is you think you've done something, but the reality is you really haven't. You just introduced one layer of potential complexity, one layer of potential protection, but it's not working to purpose yet until you do that. In the world of AI, I think it's funny. I think that there is a lot of aspects of the legal world, of the advisory world, that obviously will be completely disrupted and are being disrupted right now by artificial intelligence in all its forms. But if you think of a 65, 67-year-old person today on the kind of end of the boomer cycle, like the last in boomer and Gen X border, they're likely to go 20 more years, 15 to 20 more years, with the advances in health, with the advances in medications and things like that. So 20 years is not nothing. That's a significant amount of time. They will be the last ones to adopt AI because they don't care, they don't need it, they don't want it. They will be the first ones scammed by it, robbed by it. So you have this interesting thing, and their kids know it. Their Gen X kids and their grandkids know that grandmom and grandpop are the most vulnerable because now voice calls from me asking you for money sounding exactly like me because someone used 11 Labs on Instagram and took this podcast or whatever, right? And no one knows the difference. So there's all these threats that AI will do to confiscate their wealth. They will be the last ones to use it. So you have 10 years where they're going to need a human to maintain their trust, to set up their trust, to have that conversation, just because they're not going to use anything else. For those using AI to kind of save legal fees and do that, they're coming in more educated than ever. But again, they know what a Mercedes is and why they want one. They have no idea what it takes to maintain it and how to drive it yet properly. So I'm very bullish, and I know you are, on the human aspect of it, but are you seeing that even show up yet? Or are we still early days in the conversation of, I could just use AI for that? Or is that starting to show up in the practice yet? Or is it still not? Is it still mostly conversation? Just curious.
It is showing up, in the scams. It makes scams more efficient, if you will. You can get more calls out there and whatnot. And that's actually one of the ways that convinces an elder to come in and start doing some more planning is when they get scammed and 15, $20,000 disappears, and now it's like, oh boy. And we've had several of those folks come in and just, what we need to update this. I need to step aside and be in control of this trust and have my loved ones take over for me, and a relief. Sometimes they can get the money back, other times they can't. It just depends on the nature of the scam. And then you have, you run an AI in the background, keeping the metrics on what's the best scam and what's the best heartstring to pull on to make them even better. A lot of times it's someone who sounds just like your grandson saying they need money because they're in jail. They don't want to call their parents. They don't want to call the Gen X person because they're embarrassed. So they're calling you for money. And it's outlandish what people do. They're sending a sheriff who's supposed to be holding their grandson. They're sending them Walmart cards for bail. You just don't get it. And so those are the conversations that bringing it back to beginning. That's something's wrong. When you're in that area, something's wrong. You just can't put your finger on it, but something's not going right. We see people come in whose cover on their checkbooks have almost been rubbed off because they know that that's their money and people are trying to get it, and they're just making sure it's still there. They know something's wrong. So that's one of the
Yeah, I think they're humbled by it too. I mean, I can think of personal conversations or even messages I've gotten from family members in that demographic, right? They're humbled by it in like a healthy way, but it's scary for them. And every boomer's IT department is their Gen X counterpart or son or daughter, right? It's like whatever it is, Netflix stopped working, they call you, right? How do I get this to work? It's not working, right? My Roku's not working. Like, forget buying Bitcoin. Like, they're just calling you about, like, my phone, USPS says I missed a package and I clicked on a link, but I think I did something wrong. And you're going, oh my God. Like, that's the anxiety that the X
Mhm.
has. It's also kind of the opening door because it usually is the thing that lets the aging parent or the one who needs some future help to know, I don't have my hands around this and I really need to get there. So I think it's a good catalyst as much as it's a threat vector. It's just way different than it was when I was a kid. And I remember when my grandmother called my father and said, I just talked to a man on the phone and I think I agreed to buy something and I don't think I should have. Like, that used to be a phone call on a landline
Mhm.
and now that's at light speed, right? Um, and so these things are out there. Facebook's another one, right? More boomers than ever on Facebook. I think they're the only people left on Facebook. But there's a lot of them, and they don't understand. They don't understand that that's the most weaponized micro ad targeting machine ever, right? They're on there to see their grandkids or talk to their friends from 50 years ago in whatever groups they're on Facebook, or read the news that they think is still the news. And they don't realize that every single one of those likes, clicks, shares, scrolls is basically data harvesting how to attack them.
Right.
That's really all it is.
Right. Also don't realize that if they don't give someone permission and the credentials to take their page down, that they're going to live on Facebook forever.
Well, and this is a whole other thing that absolutely made me sick to my stomach. A couple weeks back, there was a post, and Meta Platforms filed a patent. I don't know if you saw this or not. Maybe we talked about it. I can't remember. Filed a patent. And the patent is that after someone dies, that Facebook wants and owns the right to their profile and can use AI to continue to post based on the data that they've gathered from all their prior shares, because it's their asset. And because someone no longer posting is a bad user experience for the rest of the people who were following them. And that language is written, as psychopathic as that sounds, in the patent filing. And this is beyond social media or Facebook. This is just about grieving in general, right? Like just the natural human experience being now something that you have to plan for, on top of the inheritance, on top of who's getting what, and on top of all the communications. It's literally just unwinding the memorialization of their life in a digital world as well as an analog one.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's just you wouldn't think that would be a problem, that anybody would want to do that and file a patent for that. But likeness is depending on who you are, it's probably got some value there. And if you want to continue the person to say, hey, buy this stock. I've been dead for 25 years, but I still own it, or whatever you want AI to say. That it just um,
Well, it's about the advertiser side, right? It's the ability to not see a dip in user activity so I can keep charging that CPM. And again,
yeah,
not
I'm hoping people with, AI experience are actually going to be out creating things that help people, that can detect other AI coming in on a scam. Wouldn't it be wonderful if your phone could, if you got to a certain age and gave permission, that your phone could route that to someone, some loved one to could handle it instead of routing it to you or something like that. So maybe there'll be some good screening developed along with the scams to help us all detect when we're being
well,
taken
I-
advantage of.
yeah, I mean, I don't have I don't have a good guess at that. I have a pattern recognition of technology experience for 20 years that lets me know that that'd be wonderful, but that is not likely to be the case. What is more likely to be the case is humans will adapt. And what we will do is we will rediscover humanity that we've lost without realizing we lost it for the last 25 years. And what that means in business, and that what that means in generational planning, is human conversations with other humans, humans in our family, human advisors like you, human advisors like, it means listening to podcasts that are live, because right now, at least, those aren't as easy to fake as podcasts with me and you on them that weren't us. Although those exist today and soon will probably be live too without being there. At the end of the day, trust and attention are the two scarce assets. And so we'll put a premium on those. What that means for families and what that means for this planning is using those tools to get educated on the conversations that matter and the questions that matter. So, what are some of the questions that people don't know they should ask, but after they talk with you, they go, wow, that was really simple? Give us some questions that they could ask. Just rapid fire, whatever some of the good questions are that help them have a human conversation with the people that they need to have it with, whoever those people may be.
Okay, so who's going to make the decisions for the kids should something happen to mom and dad, kids under 18? Who's going to make the decisions for the kids who aren't married over 18 when they get in a car accident or they become incapacitated and can't manage their financial affairs? Does a will or not having a will, what happens? What is the plan, the state plan for me if I don't have a will? If I do have a will, what happens? Uh, how do people find my assets when I'm gone? What happens if I'm in a permanent vegetative state or a terminal condition? and I'm on life support or I'm on a feeding tube. What are your wishes if that happens to you? Who is going to make your medical decisions if you can't make your own medical decisions? Is it going to be uh, your loved ones? Is it going to be a proxy method where the doctor brings in people into the room and they just vote on who's going to make your decisions? Or are we going to go to court? And is the court going to decide who does that? And is the court going to disqualify you from managing your parents' finances because you have a bad credit rating? Um, you just need to have these things set up ahead of time because they're all questions. How do you feel about probate? Do you mind going through probate? Do you mind the fact that once you record that will with the county, that anyone off the street can come in and read it? They can know all your assets, where they're headed, and all those kind of things. Does that bother you? I mean, you won't talk to your kids about it, but is it okay to give it to the whole world? Just those questions we're always talking to people about. We're giving presentations, twice a month on these questions and just trying to open people's eyes to say, hey, this can happen. How do you maintain family harmony? You got a blended marriage. How are we going to make sure that the first parent who dies doesn't disinherit their kids? Because inevitably it goes to the spouse. A length of time passes, and the new spouse leaves it to their kids instead of your kids. So, you basically end up disinheriting them, things like that. So there's a lot of questions, how are we gonna take care of the kids? How are we going to, um, take care of, little Bobby who has special needs? How are we gonna do that? I mean, we can't leave them a whole bunch of money because 'cause it'll blow their benefits. Um, what happens if somebody you leave the money to dies at the same time you do or dies before you? I mean, do you have a plan for where it goes if that happens? If people don't die in the right order, what
Yeah.
happens?
Yeah. I love the way you pragmatically just say things like so right. They just hit you right in the teeth. Like, what if you don't die in the right order? Because that's just a. It's like, wow, that one hit hard, right? Because we all think there's an order that we're gonna go.
Yeah, yeah.
We're all usually
And
wrong.
there is, we just don't know it.
Right. Um, let's shift gears. That was great. Let's try another way. Uh, you're a Gen Xer, and you want to know how to empathize with what the boomer is thinking today, top of mind related to that. What they're denying, what they're in denial about and not aware of, what they are struggling to communicate, and what their top of mind is. What how do you empathize with a boomer if you're not one right now on this topic?
Ah, well, the boomer's really not any different than anyone else. I mean, it's more than just listening. It's like you say, it's that emphasizing with them, and it's just trying to understand from their point of view. And the only way you can do that, Chris, is if you what we call check for understanding. Is you just stop them and you say, okay, what I'm hearing you say is this, and repeat it back and see if you got it right before you go to the next level. Because if you're missing it on the surface, you're not going to get down deeper. And the big reason we miss it on the surface is because we all look at life through our lenses, our experiences, and our memories, and everything when we grew up. That's our model. It's how we shape the world. And so we start assuming that the people we're talking to has the same lens that we do. And it's the assumptions that kill you. It's the assumptions that keep you from getting knowledge with your parents because you're talking 20, 30 years later down the road
Right.
with your experiences. And they probably had their parents had a different idea about money than they treated you with too. So you just have to go in and say, okay, when I hear you say that, I'm thinking you're thinking this. Is that correct? Or you just try to check for the understanding to get in there. Because until you get that same model, um, we're not gonna grow. And our models, we spent so much time developing our own models and saying, okay, well, when Chris says this, I know it's not true, so I don't even have to process it. Well, if what you're saying is true and my model's broken, it's going to take me a lot of anxiety and a lot of time to change and work on my model because we love our models. That's how we approach the world. And if you just don't have the same as your parents, you're never going to connect.
Well, and I think, so the assumption is the key. I'm going to give this to you because we've never talked about this, but this is my framework for empathy mapping, right? So this is what it looks like. Think, feel, say, do is what those letters stand for. If you just think about 4 quadrants, right? You guys have heard me say before, human beings think in pictures. A picture's worth 1,000 words. We've all kind of got that memorized, right? And it really is. If I say Matt's car, I have no idea what Matt's cars look like. But right now, when I say Matt's car, he saw it. What is it? What's your car?
It's a Toyota Tundra, really big one.
What color is it?
Mhm. It's black.
And is it clean or dirty right now?
It's, dirty because I just took it in the mountains and
Colorado and Wyoming. It's hailing it
yeah,
now.
well, it's
Huntington. It's like
Wyoming.
so. My point is that I would have no chance at finding Matt's car in a parking lot with more than 3 cars in it until he just told me that. But he immediately what he saw when I said Matt's car, he saw his car, right? And so everyone has an assumption of what they see. To his point, when we're trying to empathize, well, Matt, what I'm looking at is like if you were to think about is it a good exercise for someone who's a boomer saying, what does my Gen X kid think? Of course, they have assumptions. They go, oh, they're worried about the kids. They're worried about this. Well, that may be true. It also may not be true. That may be you thinking that that's what they're worried about. Right. Or, so the only way to really do it is listen to them, but then also go through this lens of when they hear certain words like inheritance, when they hear words like probate, what do they think, feel, say, do? One of the things they might think is, I've heard that word. I have no idea what it is. So they can't feel anything but confused because they
Mhm.
don't know what it is. And so what they think is, I don't know what it is, but I've heard of it. Or they think, I've never heard of it, so I definitely don't know what it is. And now they feel either excited to learn or dumb. And then they say something. They'll use words. They'll say words like, cuss, or they'll say, what does that mean? Or they'll like there's an actual phrase that'll come out of their mouth once they've thought and felt. And so if you can map to that, you have a chance at understanding their perspective. And then what do? Well, confused minds never buy anything. They don't make decisions. Confused minds paralyze and analyze. That's what they do. So if you think, feel, say, do on word strings, you can start to empathize with any demographic in your family tree on how they're seeing whatever the thing is.
That's correct, and even some of us, think differently because, for some of us, when, you say the word elephant, some people see the actual animals, other people see the words, the actual letters, so when you say Matt's car, in my mind, I was looking at the letters saying Matt's car, and so I actually had to think what the car was. I had to
I
switch
said
to the
your car. If I had said your car, you probably would have seen your car right away because you wouldn't have thought
yeah.
any third.
But you're absolutely correct, and then, to do that also, because there's some stress in trying to broach a conversation that you've never had before. Um, there's also, the tools where you're not ever using the word you, you're using more I statements is what they call them, or you're starting, well, I need this to take care of you, or I need this to be successful, or I need this to do certain things instead of, well, you never tell me anything. I mean, the minute the you comes out of your mouth at the beginning of the statement, that's going to be confrontational and that type of thing. But I need to take care of you, and so it would be very helpful if I had a little more facts and things like that. Are always some other tools that we can use.
So, winding down, one of the things that we're doing here, obviously, this is not legal advice. So the disclaimer usually is up front. We'll do it right now at the end because I forgot to do it up front. Matt is an attorney and has clients in all 50 states and beyond for the Wyoming asset protection stuff, has a practice area specifically around legacy planning, estate planning, and things like that for Colorado clients as well. So if you are a Colorado resident and you want to actually have a conversation, you can call 970-820-0090 and a human will answer the phone during business hours, or you'll get a machine or an answering service during non-business hours, old school. No chat bots, none of that, human to human. If you are in all other 50 states, you want to talk about wealth planning, legacy planning, asset protection, and things like that, and what Wyoming might offer you, then the office line for that firm is 307-463-3600. Had to do the squint there. So that's how you can get in touch with Matt if you actually want to have any kind of human conversation, pre-consult, and just kind of understand, what some of the the customizations or concerns might be for you. But we do these things every week for free for an hour. It's a billable hour. Matt will never get back. So he always brings his best. I always try to bring mine and bring out the best in him. We thank you guys for tuning in. We hope you come back every Wednesday. You can ask questions during the week. You can ask them via DM. You can ask them in the chat. So feel free to comment and do that. Make comments. Let us know what questions you have. We'll put them in future office hours and AMAs every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. And again, this show itself on replay or live is not legal advice. And just like the AI, you should not do anything without consulting your fiduciary legal advisors on the tax, legal, and benefits or costs to your portfolio. However, hopefully you'll ask better questions. And if you need resources or relationships, happy here at Wealth Matters and the Atomic Level to make introductions to people that I use. Matt, any final thoughts for today for the Gen X or the Boomer, the empathy map, anything in between that you want to finish with?
Yeah, this is, we're not isolationists like we've been taught. We are all in a community. We're all in this together. You need to start the conversations with the people who are older than you and the people that are younger than you. That's just a way to get along and to know better how to serve others.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. We will be back next week for another AMA Office Hours Matt Chats with Matt Miley. And for those who are interested in the second part of our doubleheader today on Atomic Level Live, we do have Running with the Boltards, which I cannot wait to unpack what is happening there. Totally different content, Matt, by the way. But the fastest growing, most successful on a percentage of free to paid subscriber base on finance in all of Substack is coming on at the 2:30 West Coast, 5:30 East Coast hour. And you'll want to tune in for that. And we'll be back at that time. But until then, everyone, have a great day. Matt, thanks for being here, as always.
Thank you.